Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi, my name is Rasa. I'm events manager here at Rocket. Very happy to see so many of you here this evening. We started our year very intensively with events. We'll have more and more of them later on, so be sure to follow us on Facebook to be updated about all of them. We're very happy we're having this nice initiative together with Startup Wise Guys. So we are organizing these joint master classes each month, and today we're having our first one this year. Today we will be talking about right positioning of your brand. And we are very lucky to have HWONG here tonight to present us this topic with more of 25 years of his experience in technology, marketing, and consulting. No doubt, Henry will direct us to the right positioning and your startups and companies' way to success. So, Henry, scene is yours.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? All right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me over here. It's my first time in Lithuania, first time in the Baltics. I am a little disappointed though. Yeah, I was promised a lot of snow. I don't see any out there, so somebody please order some up very soon. All right. So. Before I get started, and I just want to give you a heads up, I tend to walk around, and so they had the Facebook thing moved back so you can see me walking around. I don't like hiding behind podiums, but I think it's more friendly that way. But just a little bit about my background. I'm based in San Francisco, so it's a long ways away. So my body's, the good thing is I was telling everybody that it is now officially 8 a.m., so it's morning in San Francisco, so I'm completely awake now. So that means, of course, there's no excuse. Then I actually have to be awake up here doing this. But are you gonna, or should we change the presentation? Hello. Well, while they're switching it over to my presentation, I do want to thank the Startup Wise guys and Rocket for inviting me here. One of the things I like doing, I take trips to Europe 2 or 3 times a year, and one of the reasons why I do that is to get out of the Silicon Valley bubble. It's very easy to be caught up in all that culture and think the world has changed already, and then being able to interact with different startup communities and technology communities in the world is very helpful for me to get perspective on some of the things that we're doing. So this is why I enjoy doing things like this. Change? Well, anyway, did you hear about no, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Okay, all right, so there's my name. And there's my title. I'm a partner at Cunningham Collective. So I've been working at the firm for about 8 years now. I'm now a partner. And what we do is positioning and brand strategy work for mostly tech companies because we're based in San Francisco, although sometimes we do food, do a few other things. And a lot of this work, a lot of what I'm going to present today is based on the work that we do for our clients all the time. And so we very much believe that positioning is probably the most important thing that you need to do first before you do any marketing, you do any communications, any PR, any of that stuff. So understanding your positioning is going to be very important. And so just in case you wonder why my name is not on the firm, the founder of the firm it's named after Andy or Andrea Cunningham. So I always tell people we're a branch off probably everybody's too young to remember this, the Regis McKenna PR agency back in the 70s and 80s. And she was at Regis McKenna when she worked with Steve Jobs to launch the Macintosh. So she was there to launch the Macintosh in 1984, and then started her own agency to launch, if you remember Pixar, which is part of Disney now, she launched Pixar and also launched Next. So a lot of history with Silicon Valley. So there's some perspectives that were built in to some of the frameworks that we're doing. One thing that there's also a book, and if you're curious about the book, I'll tell you how to get it later. But a lot of the stuff that we do, we're very open with how we think. There's nothing proprietary out here. What we want to do is to get everybody to really understand how we think, because we selfishly believe we do things the right way. So, of course, we would like for everybody else to also be able to do what we do. And so there is a book that documents a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. Okay, is everybody ready? Oh, and I know there's another mic running around, so in case you have questions, feel free to ask. So let's get started. Okay, so positioning. This is about positioning, but this doesn't look like a positioning slide. It's about differentiation. If there's only one thing that you take away from today, and when it comes to your marketing, your positioning, your brand, that is that differentiation is probably the most important thing that you need to think about. What makes your company different than everybody else in a way that makes sense? So you have to think about that. It's not enough to be like everyone else. I've worked with a lot of clients who have very strong sales force leadership, and the sales guys always say, well, our competitor is saying this, so we should say the same thing. That doesn't work, because you just become part of the noise. And so if everybody is saying the same thing, then nothing matters. I mean, nobody will understand. Nobody, especially if you're a startup, because if you're working in a situation where it's a competitive situation, you're going against more established competitors, there's got to be a reason why they want to work with you and not the established competitors. So you got to think about differentiation. What makes your company special while you're thinking about your marketing and your brand? Now, it's important to think about differentiation, that it's not just what you think about differentiation, it's about what your customers and your audience thinks about the differentiation enough. Because, in the work that I've done with a lot of technology companies, the differentiation is oftentimes, I have this feature. It turns the background blue. It makes it look different. Or it's faster, or we're cheaper, all these different things. If your customers don't care about that, then it doesn't matter. So think about the differentiation that your company is, what you're doing differently. It could be anything. It could be features if it's very special. It could be your business model. It could be how you treat your customers. We'll talk a little bit about how to think about differentiation in a second. But you have to think about differentiation. That's the number one thing you need to think about when you're thinking about your marketing and your communications and PR. All right. So what is really positioning? Okay. Positioning is actually it's not a new concept. It's been around since the 70s. Yeah, I know, that seems like dark ages for half of this crowd here. But positioning has been in and around advertising and marketing for a long time. But if you think of what positioning is, the reason why I use the word positioning is because it means it's the position on a map. So think of your marketplace as a battlefield where there's lots of activity in some places, not so much everywhere else. But positioning puts yourself in the white space of that map. And that map is in the mind of your target audience, your customers, influencers, and so forth. How are you going to position yourself in a way that puts you apart and away from the noise? So think about that way. Positioning, marketing, they say, marketing is like war. So you have to think about that as, where's your place on the battlefield? Now, it's also important to make sure when you think about your positioning is how it's a map, right? You can't jump from map. They haven't invented teleportation or anything like that yet. Just wait for Elon Musk. He'll get it there. But you need to have a pathway from that place to another. So it has to be logical on your positioning. So your positioning can evolve, but you need to think of it as a map, so you go from one place to another as you maintain that white space in the market. So that's what positioning is all about. Now, I said positioning has been around for a long time, and actually, how many people here have been in brand agencies or worked with brand agencies or anything like that? Okay. Wow, okay. All right. Okay, so actually the funny thing is that if you talk to 10 marketing and brand people and ask them for a definition of brand, you'll get 12 answers. There is nothing, everybody has their own definition of brand, whether it's the feeling you give, the customer experience, all the way down to the colors of your palette and the logo you have. So it's important to establish what we mean by brand. And what's happened is that positioning has always been part of brand. In fact, if you talk to a lot of creative agencies, they'll call it brand positioning. And so they think of it as a creative exercise. So we think of things differently. We actually, especially, how many companies here are consumer and how many are B2B? And B2B companies. Okay, so if you're in a B2B company, what's really important? Oftentimes in B2B companies, who your customer references are actually some of the best sales tools that you can ever have. And they use words to describe what your company does. And so words matter, especially in B2B, but also in consumer. How you describe your company rationally is very important. And understanding how that all works together will help you connect your marketing to your strategy. So positioning can be a single statement. And it seems really simple, but if you can figure out how to describe your company in one sentence that talks about what you do, why you matter, all these different things in one sentence, you've figured out your strategy. So it's important to really understand how to be able to do that. If you have to spend 20 minutes describing what your company does, you don't have your strategy nailed down. You don't have your positioning nailed down. What you want to be able to do, and I've always said this, is that what does Wall Street Journal, how do they want to articulate what you do when you're successful? You know, they'll say, your company's, comma, blah, 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 blah type of company. If you can get it, now, not every company can get to that point, especially in a startup where things move all the time. But if you can get it down to that, something very simple, that's great. So, but that's meant to be a rational description of your strategy. But once you have that foundation, then you can do the brand stuff, the fun stuff. I always love doing the brand stuff because it's more creative, but it's emotional. And so emotion's great. Brands oftentimes evoke emotion, and you've seen some of the best, the Super Bowl is happening in a couple of weeks. And in the US, we watch the Super Bowl ads more than we watch the game sometimes. But they evoke an emotion. But the problem you have with evoking just emotion is that if the audience doesn't know why they should care about what you're doing, then it doesn't matter. That emotion comes and just disappears. And so you want to be able to make sure you target how you talk about your company, and then it's very easy to wrap the emotion around that. So that's how we look at it. So they all work together. So that's why we use a yin-yang diagram here, because the two of those things, your rational side and your emotional side, sounds almost Freudian, but they work together to create your brand. So, but we think you need to do positioning first, and so that's why that's what we advocate. So before you bring the brand agencies out, you need to think about how you want to communicate what your company does. Now, have an example of that. So there was a company. How many people here are hardcore technologists? Okay, so have you heard of Puppet? Puppet. Okay, you've heard of Puppet. I didn't see you raise your hand. No, okay. So Puppet is a company we worked with based in Portland. And so what they did, they went through a brand exercise first. So they created a new logo, all these different things, and it was this angular sort of, I call it Halloween colors. black and orange, and it didn't look very friendly. So if you go to puppet.com today, you'll see that logo. So that was a logo they created. But they realized they didn't have anything behind it. They didn't understand, the PR team didn't know how to communicate what Puppet does. And so what they did was they brought us in to help sort of backfill the foundation for that rebrand. And what happened is that what we found out, because it's an open source community was such an important aspect of that. So it needed to be warm. The company needed to be able to engage the open source community in a way that continues to support the commercial side of what they were doing. And having a logo that's all squares and black and orange doesn't fit that. So what positioning does is it helps narrow down the choices in the creative side in a way that makes a lot more sense. So that's why you have to do the strategic side as first. Now, I say positioning, I said strategy, I say positioning is strategy, okay? And so why is this important? Because your brand, your marketing, your website, your press releases, anything you do, your blogs even, what they're doing, they're making promises that your company has to keep and what your products have to do. That's what your marketing and your brand does, okay? And so what positioning is and what your brand is it's a public articulation of your strategy. So it's not just a wrapper, it's not just pretty colors around what you do, it's a public articulation of your strategy. So you have to think about it from that perspective. So positioning needs to be connected to strategy. In fact, in the client work that we do, we end up spending a lot of time poking holes in the company strategy and the product strategy as part of this effort. So they often, one of the things, and I'll get to this in a second, but you have to pick markets. You have to do priorities, because marketing spread over like peanut butter or your strategy, if it's peanut butter, will be reflected in this marketing. Because I actually have personal experience here. So, back in I think 2005, so before half of you were born again, it was my first opportunity to be a CMO. I was very excited. So it was a startup, I was a 12th employee, and I was being brought in to be the head of marketing. So I thought, okay, very exciting. Everybody always has that feeling when you get your first executive position. And so my first thing to do was to update the website and update the marketing and all that stuff. Okay, great. Sounds like fun. Marketing, pretty colors, all these different things. The problem was the two founders did not agree on who should be the primary market. We were building software to help manage contractors for enterprises. So one founder came from the HR side. HR manages contractors. Let's focus on HR. The other person came from procurement and said, let's manage it like a purchasing. So, one person is about compliance. HR is all about compliance and making sure you're following the rules. I'm trying to make sure I'm not inappropriate here. And procurement's about cost savings. And the two sides don't care about each other's care-abouts. So what did I do? So if I were to tell my 2005 self to go back and do this, I would have told them to focus on a market. But what I ended up doing in my inexperience was try to paper over and came up with peanut butter messaging that neither side liked. So, needless to say, the marketing flopped. So, if you're muddled in your product and market and company strategy, don't expect your marketing to fix it. Your marketing is a reflection of your strategy. So, make sure your strategy is clean. Make sure you know where you're prioritized, what market you're going after, what features make your product different. All these different things need to be taken care of first, because no amount of marketing is going to fix a problematic strategy. Does that make sense? Okay. What just happened? Okay, well, there one. Okay. So, I talk about focus, I talk about choices. You have to make choices, okay? And one of the things is you have to think about if you're a small company, you have only so many resources to do. And if you promise the world and you can't do half of the stuff that you promise, then it falls flat. And this is very important, especially for startups who are entering the market for the very first time. So if the first impression goes a long way, and if you fumble that first impression, let's say, oh yeah, we're expanding. You know, you're a company in Lithuania, and say, okay, we're also in Germany, but you're planning on being in Germany in 12 months. But somebody who's German coming into your website is going to expect you to be able to service them. And if you say that oh no, I was just kidding, that was a plan, you've now lost that potential customer. Even though you could be the best, in 12 months, you're the best market, you're the biggest competitor in Germany, that person, you've lost that person. So it's important to understand what's credible and what's authentic to what you guys do. And so you have to be honest with yourself. Oh, party foul, spilled beer. Okay, that's okay. There's plenty apparently. So understanding what's credible is going to be very important when you're going to market. Now, this is technology, right? Everybody wants to talk about the future. So you have to promise the future a little bit. So that may be below the waterline. Part of thinking about your positioning and your messaging is about how far down the waterline you want to go. How much of the future can you credibly talk about when you're speaking about it? So let's say you are expanding. So say if your sales cycle is 6 months and you're going to be there in 5 months, it's okay to talk about that because in 6 months you'll be there. But you have to think about where you are as a company and what's the appropriate level of messaging that you want to do. So because what you really want to do is avoid this. So does anybody here know, I know I'm 10 hours away from home, so this might fall flat, but anybody hear of Cheesecake Factory? Yes. So Cheesecake Factory is notorious for its huge menu. Look at all this stuff that it does. Chicken salad, Chinese chicken salad. My mom never made Chinese chicken salad, so I don't know where that came from. Cobb salad, fettuccine, blah, 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 blah. And then they have 24 different cheesecakes that can't be all good. Come on. But you see this, and how many people think they do a great job in everything that they do? I don't think they do a good job in anything they do, frankly. And anytime you go to a restaurant that has a menu that's about 20 pages, you run away very quickly. But that's what happens when you don't focus, right? This is what happens all the time. Oh, we're going to attack this market. We want to say this. We want to say that. We want to do this. We want to do that. If you do that, your website looks like this. And this is not what you want. You do not want the Cheesecake Factory menu of websites. That's what you want to avoid. Okay. All right. So you were saying, okay, I can only focus. What's credible? Oh my God, does that put me in a box? And can I not? What happens when things change and my strategy changes? What do I do with my messaging? You just change it as your strategy evolves. Every company, in certain situations they evolve every 3 years, like very mature companies, or in certain startups they change every 3 weeks. But that's okay. The idea is that you need to understand that company positioning can change over time. And I always like citing Amazon as a great example here. So again, when they went public, they filed what they call an S1 in the US. And so if you go look at Amazon's S1, which I did read, these are very exciting documents. No, they're not. But how did they articulate what they did to the investor community? Because at the time they were selling books, CDs, DVDs, and so forth. So did they say, we're the largest retailer for online books and movies? No. In their S1, they articulated that they were going to be the biggest online retailer of information services. Information services. Sounds more than books. Sounds more than DVDs. Now, so you could see that they had bigger ambitions to do what they want to do. But did that mean that they already knew in 1997 they were doing Amazon Prime or AWS? No, it doesn't mean that at all. But clearly their strategy was much bigger than being a retailer. But they didn't say that in their marketing. You go to their website, they still said online retailer for books. The world's largest book retailer. That's how they did their marketing, but their strategy was different. So that's a great example of how your marketing and your positioning can evolve over time. As long as your strategy is credible, your marketing and how you talk about your company can change as well. And there are a few other examples as well. So it's okay. Don't feel like when you figure out what you're doing today will put you in a box. You have the permission to change it over time. Get that picture? Okay, good. All right, I can change it. All right, so they were joking, and they should say I showed myself that I could do a little karaoke, so they said that I should sing up here. I'll pass on that. I don't have enough beer. I'm going to start it, but I don't have enough beer right now. Okay, so you're saying, okay, great. Positioning is awesome. We should do it. How the hell do I start? Okay, so this is a framework that I will walk through. This is what we call the 6 C's. And so these are the areas that you should be considering when you think about your messaging and your positioning. So this is not a turn the crank exercise. This is not, I say this, I say this, I say that. Although I do have a Mad Libs exercise. You guys know what Mad Libs is? Okay, no, I won't use that example anymore. But it's not you put something in, it's not a formula, and you come out with something else. What we're trying to do here is, these are the things you need to consider while you're doing your positioning and you're thinking about your messaging. And so I will go through each one of these in detail, just to make sure that you can understand where we're coming from, so you can understand why it's important to think about these things. But, so let's just get started. So let's talk a little bit about the first C. So core, category, community, this is our pathway. So let's talk a little bit about core. This is actually fundamental to what we do. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an exercise for your company, just to see what you think it is. But why is core important? So core, we have this view that companies are like people. Well, of course, companies are like people because they are made of people. People can, and so people have their way of doing things, their processes, how they do things, how they think, how they measure, all these different aspects of how your company is. Now, if you're in a startup, it's a little bit different. Usually when we're working with larger companies, we have to consider this to reflect the company organization of the way it is, to be authentic. But when you're in a smaller company, you have the opportunity to build a company in this manner. But why is DNA important? Well, if I look at it, if I look at myself, I like watching basketball. My team's not doing that very well, not doing very well right now. So, I would love to be able to be 6'5", 230, be able to have a sweet outside three-point shot. That would be great. Or I could be Luka Doncic. That would be awesome. But here I am, in my 50s, 5'10", and a good day. Sorry, I don't have that in meters. And so I have to be honest with myself that I'm not going to be an NBA basketball player. But that's okay. So I do this. I get to geek out on marketing. But this is me understanding myself and maximizing my own talents to be able to do what I'm doing. And so part of this is understanding what your company does or how you want to build it, and so you can maximize what you can do over there. So this is a framework that Andy's been using for the last 10 or 15, 20 years. And by the way, I'm happy to share this on PDF. So if there's a way, Rasa, if there's a way to distribute this, I'm happy to. Okay, so I'll distribute this later. So don't feel obligated to take a picture. Although, maybe I should flex. Okay, all right. So in the experience that we've had collectively of over 50 years, but Andy's been doing this for 20, and I've been working on this for the last 8 years. If you think about technology companies, you can group them into 3 different distinct categories. And they operate differently, they hire differently, they measure things differently. And being able to understand the type of company in startup situation that you're going to build, or the company that you're working in today, will help you understand how to best differentiate yourself. So what are the 3 categories? So they're called mothers, mechanics, and missionaries because Andy was writing a book and she thought that was a clever name, but we actually still use the other terms. So one type of company is called product-oriented or product-centric companies. These companies exist to build the best products and sell it to everyone. That's a product-centric or product-oriented company. Let's compare and contrast that to a customer-centric company. A customer-centric company is built to service companies or service particular segments of a market and overserve them and do a great job with customer service. And then finally, this is unique, is funny, Silicon Valley, full of companies who think they're concept-driven. These are companies that exist to change behavior. They may say they want to change the world, but what they mean is change fundamental behavior. So we can look at examples here. So product-oriented companies, the ones that you can think of off the top of your head, Microsoft is a great example. They build products, they sell the same product. Office 365 is the same here in Lithuania as it is in California. Oracle does the same thing. Intel, they put chips in everybody's computer. So that's a product-centric company. Again, one product, the best product they can, sell it to everybody. On the flip side, you have customer-oriented or customer-centric companies. So examples are you guys familiar with Zappos? Okay, so Zappos is known. Or Nordstrom is a retailer in North America as well. They're known for extraordinary customer support. Or there's an example here that may be more familiar to you guys right now, which is Yandex, which was a client of ours. And so, okay, I heard that. They're nice people. Okay. And then concept-oriented companies, these are companies that exist to change the world. An example we use in Silicon Valley all the time is Salesforce. Salesforce fundamentally changed how people bought. I mean, a lot of the batch of startups I talked to today all have their business model because of how Salesforce pushed through the change in how people bought software. Companies used to, I come from the dark ages where people used to buy license plus maintenance. And so Salesforce pushed through. They weren't the first, don't forget. Just because you're changing the world doesn't mean you're the first one to do it. Salesforce was the catalyst, though, to change the behavior of how people buy enterprise software. So that's the type of company that is. Now, Yandex, little story here. So I have worked with them. Again, I know personally they're very nice people. So I worked with them in 2012 and 2017. So my expectation of snow was colored by my experience of Moscow in December. So, okay, all right. Probably not a good comparison, but that's what happened. So I was working with them when they were first looking to enter Turkey. So they felt like they thought they were, the reason why they were winning in Russia against Google is because they were the most local. They thought they understood their customers better than Google could ever do. So they said, we're a customer-oriented company. Okay? But they misunderstood their differentiation. They weren't necessarily so step back here for a second. So they entered Turkey with an expectation of being the most local, think about this, a Russian company being the most local search engine. I guess compared to Google, if you look distance-wise, that makes sense. But they were the most local search engine in Turkey. But how did they act? So if you look at their first advertising that Yandex had in Turkey, it was basically Russian advertising on Russian TV that was translated into Turkish. Now, if you're familiar with those two cultures and have watched TV on both sides, you can see there's a completely different disconnect. They were still centralizing all their decisions in Moscow, even though they were trying to be local in Turkey. So that was a challenge. So it turns out that, yes, they are still a customer-oriented company, but their differentiation wasn't the fact that they would be more local wherever they go. Their differentiation was local because they were Russian. So they understood the Russian and the CIS markets better than anybody else. But that didn't translate to being local in Turkey. And finally, when they decentralized control, so they found that different, makes sense, the market's different. So they found out that their most successful app in Turkey was not search, of course, because Google had been there, but it was Yandex Maps. Because the maps in Turkey were horrible. And so the fact that they did traffic, all these different things, that turned out, so that's completely different than in Russia, where the priority is. So you see, that's what happens when you don't really think through what your company is really about. And the DNA of your company will turn you in places that you're going in the wrong direction. So that's my experience with Yandex. Again, nice people. I don't know what you guys are hissing about. All right, so what is this? What are some of the implications about DNA? So I always like thinking about how different companies measure each other. So in a market, in a product-centric company, the focus has always been on market share, right? Because I'm selling to the whole world, so what's my percentage of the market? That's my success. What is my market share? But if you're a customer-centric company, what do you really care about? Your customer relationships. And you care about what they call wallet share. How much can you upsell, cross-sell, maintain those relationships? What is my NPS score, right? That's what people care about in a customer-centric company. Now, if you're a missionary or a concept-oriented company, you don't care about either one of those. All you do is care about how many companies are following you or how big your ecosystem is. So Salesforce success, they're still not the largest enterprise software company, but they changed the world. They changed how people are offering. They even made their biggest competitors change how they offer their software. So that's a measure of success for them. Okay? So let's run through this really quick. I'm going to give you guys a DNA test. So pardon me while I read this. It's very short. It's only 11 questions. But you can think about these things as you go through and try to figure out what your DNA is. So pardon me as I read my slides. I hate reading my slides, but I'll do this in this case. So number one, which of these statements best describes what your company does? A, we solve a valuable customer need and we do it better than anyone else. B, we build a truly differentiated product with a great value proposition. Or C, we shake things up. Our goal is to change the world. All right, A, B, or C. Keep that in mind. Number two, think about the achievements your company values. Which of these three important achievements do you perceive your company values the most? And I'm getting a beer here for a second. So A, the quality and value of our relationships with our customers. B, growth in revenue, sales, and adoption of our product. Or C, sparking a movement that changes people's minds or behavior. So think about, this is drinking while presenting. This is the problem. All right, apologize for that. All right, so 3, which of these 3 styles of innovation do you believe occurs most naturally in your company? Outside in, what improves the experiences or better solves the needs of a customer or group of customers? Inside out, how can we do something better, faster, cheaper? Or C, way out there, what lies beyond the horizon? What bold idea is next? Okay, and 4, which of these best describe your typical pricing strategy? Based on usage or service? It's not my beer, not mine. All right, B, value or cost plus, or C, freemium or aspirational? Okay, you've had a chance to do it. I promise there's only 3 of these slides. Okay, 5. You've been just given $1 to spend on marketing. On which of the following 3 projects would your company be most likely to spend that dollar? I should say euro. Sorry, I didn't localize. Insight. A, insight into customer needs and desires. R&D on a truly amazing new product or design. Or a thought leadership platform. Spend money on marketing. That's a good one. All right. 6, which of these 3 types of people would best fit with your company culture today? Empathetic. Empathetic. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Empathetic, servant leaders. I don't know. I'm an American. I assume everybody can't understand my English. Who intimately knows and understands the customer's point of view. Brilliant developers, engineers, and leaders. Or big thinkers who make a lifestyle choice by joining your company. 7, which of these best describe where product marketing resides? Now, having been a head of product marketing, I know there's no canonical definition of this role, but stay with me for a second. Okay, where does it reside? Or does it even exist in your company? A, reporting to our CMO, aligned with sales, marketing, and operations. Reporting to our CTO, or head of product, aligned with product management, IT, and R&D. In the C-suite, reporting to our CEO. 8, for which of the following things is your company CEO most likely to be lauded in the marketplace? A, reputation building. B, product evolution. Or C, vision. Okay? Hope everybody remembers what their answers are. Okay? Okay. Number 9, which of the following 3 project proposals would likely be most funded? End-to-end customer service experience assessment, an R&D project to build a near-term to medium-term solution for a technical problem, or a feasibility study on an exciting but theoretical concept. How would your company leadership team most likely confirm that a value proposition is correct? We tested it with our customers, or sales are up, must be successful, or we feel it. It's in our blood. All right, 11. Which of these 3 statements best describe how your company defines the word brand? Brand. The sum of all experiences a customer has, or just the look and feel of your customers, or the way our spirit is embodied. Very touchy-feely. Okay, finally, 12. Which of these statements feel most true? A, answering these questions was easy. Answering these questions was difficult. Or C, our management team answered them all differently, which actually happens a lot of the time. Right? Okay. So how does this help you figure out what your core is? Anybody have trouble? Okay, anybody answer C on the bottom for number 12? Oh, okay. We'll talk later. Okay. But I think one of the reasons why we ask this question is because it's important that your leadership team all be on the same page when it comes to your marketing. Right? And so the way we work with our clients is not a marketing exercise to figure out your brand. It's a company strategy exercise. And for the marketing people in the room, they totally have been through this, because I've been through this. If your salesperson doesn't agree with your marketing, you're shot. If your product people aren't delivering on the promise of your brand, it's done. You have to make sure. So the exercise you need to go through is to understand that you need the leadership team to all match up with you and believe in what marketing is doing. Otherwise, marketing gets squeezed, and there's a reason why Silicon Valley, the average tenure of a CMO is 18 months. Because marketing is not getting the support it needs. And so thinking about your positioning and your brand, it's a company exercise, not a marketing exercise. So let's get to the answer key. So, if your answers were predominantly A, you're a mother or customer-centric company. If your answers were B, you're a mostly product-centric company. Or if they're C, you're a concept-driven missionary company. So you're saying, okay, great, I got my deal. Well, so let me ask you this. For the people who are actually paying attention, so I'm not expecting every hand to go up. So how many people feel like they're in an A or a customer-centric company? Okay. How many people feel like you're a B or a product-centric company? Okay. And how many people feel like you're changing the world? Okay. All right. So you're like, okay, I just went through this. What the hell did I just do? And see, oh, hold on.
But what about if you feel like being mother and mechanic at the same time?
Good question. Now, these are not absolute categories. So let me get back here. Let me get back here for a second. Every company has aspects of all of these things, right? And as a client of mine, see, I know you hissed. A client of mine at Yandex actually said, it's actually, think about your DNA as being your first impression that you give to a company, to your customers. Just because you're a product-centric company doesn't mean you don't have customer support. You just may do it differently, right? So a customer-centric company would do customer support, they probably add people. So because people like talking to people, imagine that. But if you, no Siri, I'm not talking to you right now. But if you're a product-centric company doing customer support, you probably do it in a more scalable way. FAQs, website, drive them to something else. So you have customer support and everything. It's just that you might do it differently. You want to say that again? No. Okay. All right. So you can have aspects, but I think the thing is you need to prioritize what makes your company operate differently. So yes, you can have aspects of all three of these, but what's the most important one? And the reason why it's important to think about that way is because it does impact how you operate your company and what's important for the company. So if you have a mix, so like we go back to the KPI discussion, what's more important, market share or wallet share? Right, so because your marketing strategy is different, right? If you're going after market share, you're doing broad-based marketing. If you're doing customer-centric, you're going after a specific targeted market. So if your sales guy thinks you're a product company and you think you're a customer company, there's a problem because the product guy is going, why aren't you putting stuff in Estonia? I thought we were selling to Estonia. You're like, no, we're in Lithuania. What are you talking about? That's the kind of conversation that happens when the teams are not aligned. And so alignment is such an important thing. So let's get back to, did I answer your question? Okay, so why is the no?
Because I understand what you say about the mix, it's natural, but then if I have like five, you can't have a good you can have a good product without being customer oriented, but you can't be successful with being customer oriented without good product.
That's a focus thing because actually a traditionally product focused company thinks they know more than their customers. Think about Google. Do you think they're employing NPS scores at all? They're just building anything they want because they think they know better than you and your Android, who has an Android phone. So if people think, Google thinks they know more than you, right? So that's the mindset of a product-centric company. Engineers are off building stuff. Whether company or customers use those features is immaterial. They're building what they think are the best products. I mean, Microsoft Office, for God's sake. I mean, all those features, I still use like less than 10% of the features that's been built out over the last 30 years. That's this mindset of a product-centric company. Now, if you're really treasuring product feedback and your product is good because of customer feedback, then you're more than likely a customer company. So, yes. You're falling down. I'm having to do this. I'm like Donahue. Oh, that just dated me again.
Hi. So I was wondering, can it be like a stages? Because first you start with a product, and by being like a mother company, you get a good customer experience. You get to know the customer, and in the end, you know your customer so well that you start changing his behavior.
Yes. Okay. The answer is, I could use stereo. Okay. The answer is yes. But and I'll give you a good example of this. But the thing is the reason why we look at it as DNA is because you can't suddenly change. I can't become a zebra tomorrow. Not that I want to, But you can't change your DNA immediately. But companies can evolve over time. So so think about this. Apple. So Apple has gone through some major changes since Steve Jobs passed away. So I think, can we get a consensus here that everybody who was Apple under Steve Jobs, probably a missionary company, right? Right. Under Tim Cook, what's going on? So this is an example of a company whose the market situation has pulled them in a direction that the company is not actually ready to necessarily succeed in. So under Tim Cook, through no intent of Tim Cook, because he's still trying to operate in the innovation way of doing things, Apple is actually being pulled into becoming a product-centric or a mechanic type of company, where the care-abouts are different. I can speak to my experience as an Apple customer since, yes, 1980, had my old Apple II Plus. I would tell you this, my experience with the Macintosh, Apple II, iPhone, early iPhones and all that, product quality, not that great. It wasn't that, things broke all the time, things crashed all the time. I mean, especially in the classic Macs. I mean, you could have one program just take down your entire operating system. So the product quality, but you know the reason why I still stayed as an Apple customer is because I was as part of a revolution. I was part of a company changing the world. So I would be okay with the faults of the stuff I was buying from Apple because I was doing something different. Even before you did the Think Different campaign, people who, I mean, it might be elitist, but people with Macintoshes felt like they were better than everybody else. All creative people, they're all the same way. Okay, so, but today, the market is demanding they become a product company. So everything they do that is a product issue, because a care about of a product company is about, one of the things is product quality, right? That's what you demand from your phone. So any report of a phone that bends, right? Or something that crashes, or God forbid, this piece of crap keyboard that I'm using every day on my MacBook Pro. In an Apple of 2005, nobody cared about that because I was I was part of a revolution. Now, people are demanding better quality. They're demanding that Apple become a product company. And so they're slowly changing on that. So that's why they've done software releases that focus on killing bugs and things like that. So they are having to slowly change their company. But notice it didn't happen overnight. I still have that damn keyboard from a 2017 MacBook Pro and Steve Jobs passed away in 2011. So they still delivered a faulty product in 2017, years after Steve Jobs passed away. So it's hard to change, but people can change. So they're moving. It's like, the bigger the company, the harder it is to change. But it is possible. But you have to think of it as a evolution, because you have to change people, you have to change processes, you have to change organizations in order to change what you measure in order to make that happen. And in a large organization, it's much harder to do that. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? I have to answer that. I feel bad that she didn't feel that I answered the question, so I have to make sure that. Okay. All right. So let's get back to this. So what does it matter? So to authentically differentiate, let's get back to differentiation. That was the first slide I put out in front of you. But how does this help with differentiation? So once you know what type of company you are, now you can figure out how best to differentiate your company. So if you're a product-centric company over here, product features, engineers love those product features. Microsoft Office, love those. No, I don't love those product features. Or value, get more for less. So you see some examples here. Vodafone, Sony, EasyJet. Those are great examples of companies that differentiate based on either number of features or value. Now, if you're customer-oriented, you do it all based on either customer segmentation, which was the Yandex example. Their segment is CIS. That's a geographic segmentation. Now, there are other ways of segmenting. I don't think Forever 21 ever made it out here, because Forever 21 is a fast fashion retailer in the US that went bankrupt, so they're not in the US either. But they were typically focused on women who are entering the workforce. but they were always going to be forever 21. So it's a demographic segmentation. Did that cut too close, Maris? Okay. Or customer experience, like Amazon. Or if you're missionary, you're concept-oriented, you're changing the world. So Salesforce again, or Zara, the inventors of fast fashion, they differentiate based on either the next big thing or cult of personality. So and oftentimes both. So if you think about sales, because there's an advocate. If you're changing the world, you need an advocate. So Mark Benioff is the cult of personality around him. That's how their Salesforce is differentiated. They change behavior and they have a cult of personality. You could say Steve Jobs, cult of personality. There's he embodied the spirit of Apple. And so there's oftentimes both of those happening for concept-driven companies. Okay? So that's how you can think. That's how you can narrow down the kind of differentiation that you want to have for your company. All right. So how does it look in messaging? So these are 3 positioning concepts that I brought up just to highlight the 3 different areas. So Oracle Cloud, big, bad, red. I shouldn't say that because they were a client of ours last year. But think about what they do. They're very much a product-centric company. What do? Complete SaaS application suite, best-in-class database platform. Sorry, I should put this where we're pushing up my glasses. So, but they're very much a product-centric company. So they'll talk about the products that they have and why it's the best. Lyft, which I know is not out here, but everybody knows, Lyft is preferred by drivers and passengers for its safe and friendly experience. That's a customer-centric company. So see how the messaging changes? They don't say, I have the most cars or anything like that. I have those damn pink mustaches everywhere. And then Google, which is a mission-driven company, oftentimes you see their mission as part of their boilerplate or their messaging. Our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So that's how you can see the DNA impacting differentiation and how you talk about your company. So that you see the downstream impact. So that's why DNA to us is a very important aspect of what you should be doing. By the way, what time is it? Do we have time? Am I doing all right? Okay. All right, I'm going to just chug along. All right. So in the end, like I said, I can't be an NBA basketball player, so I'm not. But once you know what you're good at, you can actually maximize that usefulness. So that's why understanding your company is going to be the most important thing that you can when you do your brand and your positioning. All right, we spent a lot of time on that, but that is the most important thing, but I can zoom through some of these other things as well. So context, this one's pretty easy. So this is something that PR and comms people know very well, and some people derisively call it trend jacking. But really, is there something about how you're positioning the company that matters to the existing audience? So you have to really understand what's going on. It's not enough to put out what your company does. You have to understand what everybody else, what your audience cares about. So things like AI. Okay, everybody talks about AI. It might be a little old, but people are still talking about AI. But some of our clients have been talking about the experience economy. Everything's an experience. So is there something about your company's positioning and your messaging that is aligned with what people care about? Because if you think about it, take it to the next level. So journalists today care about clicks. So journalists want to write about what people are reading. And so people read what they're interested in. So understanding your audience care-abouts and what they want to do, what they want to read, will be helpful in determining how your messaging is. So you just have to be cognizant of what people are caring about. Okay? So community. So there's a reason why we didn't call it customer. So especially in B2B, but oftentimes it happens everywhere. The people that you want to target is only a small part of your community because everybody gets in, unless they're a hermit sitting under a rock in a snowstorm, they're probably talking to somebody or they're probably reading somebody. So you need to understand the care-abouts of not just your customers, but the people that are involved either with the decision-making in an enterprise deal or the people that influence their tastes, all these different things. And you need to understand what their care-abouts are as well. So you need to be able to understand not just your customers, but all the people that influence them. So that's why it's called community. And actually, an interesting community that you need to think about is your internal community to your company. Because as everybody in your company has a, well, I don't know, TikTok account or Facebook. No, does everybody still have a Facebook account? No. Okay, but everybody can be a representative of your company, whether they want to or not. So if they buy into what you're doing, then it's helpful that everybody in the company becomes a good representative of the company. So it's oftentimes important to make sure you understand or check the temperature of everybody internally, not just the executives. All right, competition. This is always a favorite one of mine. So does everybody feel like they know who their competition is in their company? Actually, what we do is we sometimes don't. Because how many people here are familiar with Clay Christensen? He's a professor at HBS. So, okay, you get a prize. You can get a beer. There's plenty over there. Okay, all right. So he's the one that is he's the godfather of, he's the one that came with the whole disruption thing. So everybody in Silicon Valley reads this stuff. But his next thing is all about jobs to be done. So what does that mean? Jobs to be done. Sounds sophisticated. How many people studied economics here? Okay. Everybody understands the concept of substitutes, right? That's the one thing that people always seem to forget when they think about their competition, especially in startups, because your competition is not just the people that do exactly your product. Your competition is oftentimes do nothing, because I'm doing what I'm doing today. So an example of this is, I don't think, did Sling Media make it out? So I was as a project interim CMO for a company called Sling Media. So it's a little box that you put next to your satellite or cable feed to be able to watch your cable TV or satellite TV on your mobile phone. So this is, needless to say, a few years ago, because you don't need to do this right now. But it was basically a piece of hardware that sits at home. And so they put a hard drive in it, and so they started serving up pictures, so you can be able to store your pictures. So you can look at imagine this, isn't that cute? You could put pictures on a hard drive, and be able to see it on your phone. Sounds revolutionary, doesn't it? No, I guess it was about 5 years ago. And so I talked to the product manager of that feature in that product. I go, so who do you think your competitor is for this feature where you can store your pictures on a hard drive and see it on your phone? He started naming off other hard drive vendors that have their own network attached storage. So other things that look like them, like physical devices at the home to serve up storage. But who's the real competitor? Facebook. People share their pictures on Facebook. We're sharing their pictures on Facebook all the time. And so the fact that he didn't understand that was a complete miss on his side. He's wondering why nobody was using it, because it was so hard to use. I mean, you think about having to copy pictures over a network and try to use this mobile app when people can just take a picture, snap it, goes onto Facebook. That's what I mean by jobs to be done. Really understand what your competitors are trying, what your customers are trying to do, and your competition becomes more clear. And so that's why there are different ways of mapping out. So Steve Blank, he's the godfather of Eric Ries in terms of, he's the one that was the foundation for lean startup approaches. We use a pedal diagram so you can organize your competitors in different ways, so you can actually start really seeing who you should be competing with and who you should be partnering with even. So that's a good way of doing that. Now, it's important to understand what your competitors are also saying, because it goes back to differentiation and messaging. Oftentimes we see our messaging should be like this on the website, and it turns out your competitors all say the same thing. That's a problem. So when you know who you're competing with, you best go read their website and go understand what they're saying. And that's different than how product people, engineers, look at competition. Because if you ask an engineer or a product person, and I used to be one, because I can say this, is that you used to say that, oh, I have these laundry list of features, right? This feature sucks, their feature is better, my feature here is faster, and all this stuff. That's not what customers look at. Customers first look at the website and to see what they're saying. Maybe if you get to the sales part of, or the consideration aspect, they'll do research on your product. But if you're saying the same thing that your competition is saying on your website, regardless of whether your product is better or worse, it's all noise. So you have to say something differently. You have to rise above the noise to understand how your competitors are saying things, and so how your customers are also looking at evaluating you guys in the first level. So it's not just about the product aspect. It's about how they're articulating what they do. So that's why it's important to understand your competition. Category. This one's a fun one. So you missionaries, are you guys building a new category? Are you changing the world? Yeah, okay, all right. I love the confidence. Love the confidence. Gotta love it. Okay. All right, so this is the reason why I come out and get out of Silicon Valley, because everybody thinks like they're changing the world. Okay. And there's even consulting firms out there like Play Bigger. I don't know if you've heard of that book, or there's a firm that is called that all about building category kings and all that stuff. Building a new category is very expensive, because you have to spend a lot of time educating the market on why you're doing something different. That's why I said when you're a concept-driven company, your first incremental dollar is not to R&D. It's not to customer support. It's to marketing, which we like. It's kind of fun. But talking about thought leadership platforms, why you're doing something right and differently, and saying how a whole category of things are doing things wrong. And that requires educating the market. So if you're really changing the world, okay, I'd love to see it. It just, you have to be aware of the investment. And the problem is a lot of startups don't have, think about this. The companies that oftentimes win the category, they're not the first ones. So was Facebook the first social network? No. Did Apple make the first smartphone? No. Was Salesforce the first SaaS company? No. Oftentimes the winners are the ones that pick up the pieces from pioneers and actually succeed. So you have to be cognizant of that when you're building a new category. No, there are going to be examples of companies that succeed at building categories. It's just difficult. So sometimes you have to think about it. So the reason why categories is also important is it helps your customers understand what you do and helps define that competitive space. So if you're an enterprise software, they know to compare you to Oracle or SAP. If you know you're known for selling canned beans, then you know all the different brands that sell canned beans. That's what category does. And so being able to articulate a category helps organize in the mind of your customer what you guys do and who your competitive set is. So good luck, guys. All right. I talked about alignment. This one's a C that's a little bit different. And the reason why we call this out as an important mechanism is that you need to get everybody on board in your executive team on what your messaging and your brand does. So a way to do this is actually asking them what success looks like for them, right? So the sales guy says, I really, 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 really want to sell in Slovenia. And at least that person will articulate that. If product says, it needs to go out, I'm building a new product and I want to be able to say that this product is part of the brand, you need to have that as well. So understand, getting your peers in the executive team, if you're a marketer, to lay out what they look at success will help get them to understand, help you understand how to build that brand in a way that makes sense for them and get their support. So this is an alignment mechanism that is very useful in the way we do our projects to be able to do so. Okay. So, you just went through this whole thing. Okay. Some people were nodding off. It's okay. I'm used to that. But how do you bring it all together? So, these are the things that come out of the exercises we do. So we have a positioning statement, the one statement that defines your role and relevance. So you saw all those considerations. I look at positioning statements like a diamond. It looks really small and pretty, but it took a lot of pressure to get there. And so that's the work that goes into positioning because it's a focusing mechanism. It's an alignment mechanism. Then you build out a message architecture. How many people know what a message architecture is? Nobody. Okay, I'll spend a little time on that. And then finally, you build your narrative, your story. Why you matter. Why your company, why now? That's always the fun creative side of things. But you have to kind of do your brand first before you get to your story. The narrative is always the one that everybody wants, but it takes work to make sure you're clear on the first two before you get to that. So I said this wasn't a plug and play, but this is one way to think about how all those pieces work together. So your company, as a whatever DNA it is focused on whatever your differentiation is. We are a category company providing a differentiated solution to the target market. We do value proposition by offering some of the benefits, key messages. Our product and service exist because why do you exist? So this is a long version of a positioning statement. Mine tend to be a lot smaller, but you see how the elements of the 6 C's come together to try to articulate. If you can answer this and fill this out, that's oftentimes very helpful. That's your positioning statement. Now, of course, it's hard to do that, especially the ones, unfortunately, that are both product and customer companies. But I think being able to get everybody to agree on how to fill this out in your company will be very important. Now, what's a message architecture? Oh boy, this is complicated. It's an eye chart. Okay. So, a message architecture is actually the fundamental result of thinking about your positioning and brand. It articulates all the different aspects of this. And so if you work with a creative agency, whether they do PR, they do logos, they do websites, this gives them a 99% head start in understanding, because most of their questions are probably revolving around this, about what are the things that matter to your company. So you look at who your target market is, who your target audience is, why your purpose, vision, and mission, the DNA, the category, the differentiation, the position statement, value proposition. That always seems to be very hard, especially for hardcore technology companies. But it's the so what of why they're using your product. Are you making their lives easier? Are things faster? Or can they fire a bunch of people? Sorry about that. Or they make them happy? All these different things. If you're able to articulate the value your customers are getting, that's half the battle. And then key messages, those are 3 to 5 different messages that can rotate around that are also ancillary to the message. So the reason why it's called an architecture is because if you just focus on the positioning statement and you don't have the other elements, people try to overstuff the position. It's got to say this, it's got to say that, and your position statement is a whole paragraph. No, there's room for other messages to be done. And then you build your elevator story, which is like it's a fundamental or a foundation for your press release boilerplates, for instance, or your About Us on your website, so you can tell your story. And then down here, once you nail that, then you can start doing the fun brand stuff. And in the end, all this does is really focus on the voice or tone that you want to give on your website. What kind of feelings you want to evoke on your creative materials. And so by having this nailed down, you can actually your marketing person will be so excited. Your agency will be very excited to see something like this, because that means you've thought through half the questions that they were going to ask you anyway, because most companies don't have this nailed down. So that's what this is. And then finally, you build a story. And I always say the story is always about why your company, why now. So it's an emotionally driven story oh, the world is changing, all this different stuff, and we're here to help, all these different things in a world, that sort of thing. But those are very effective because I've had some of my narratives turned into videos, which has been pleasing. They asked me to do the voiceover, I couldn't do it. But that's the idea, is you need to tell the story of why your company exists in an emotional way. And that emotion is described in the bottom part of your message architecture, your personality, your voice, any meme. Oh, memes, those are interesting. So memes are interesting things that, these are phrases. Politicians are great at this. And unfortunately, we have great examples of those right now. Build a wall. Yeah. Although Obama said hope and change, that's a meme too. Now, what does that mean? So what you're trying to do in a tagline is a form of a meme. So what you're trying to do is own words and phrases that your company owns. So if you say hope and change, of course you think of Obama, you think of everything he's done. Or you think of build a wall, you immediately think of Donald Trump. But that's what I mean by politicians are great at this. Companies can do the same thing. So what you do, you start using those phrases in your marketing, in your website, in your copy, all these different things so people can start associating those phrases with your company. So Salesforce, no software. Come on, it's all software in the back. But they own that statement, no software. So you immediately see it associated with Salesforce. So that's what I mean by memes. Those are things that we seem to be, based on what happened in 2016, there's no reason why companies can do the same thing. Okay. So you've done all this. Now what do you do with it? Okay. We use, it's a company-wide thing to do this, right? Your company has to execute on this. It's not just changing your website. It's not just changing collateral. It's about making sure your product fits what the company does. It's about sales being trained. It's about all these different, it's about your employees getting great new hoodies with the new logo on it or something like that. That's what this is about. So execution is not just marketing. It's all your different departments. How you're hiring people may be impacted by the type of company, right? If you're a customer-centric company, you want to have empathetic people, nice people in your company, right? If you're very product-centric, you better be hiring the best damn engineers you can. But that's how this effort cascades down into different organizations. And so we use a wheel here to help organize the different efforts. And so, for instance, what are the new product initiatives that could happen that came out of this exercise? And so now you've done all this, you've changed your company, now what do? You put it in everything. Everything, and I mean everything. Email, website, speeches, events, training, recruiting, all these different things. Why is that? Why does it matter? It's to be consistent. So Hollywood has this rule of 7 touches. You don't remember anything, people do not remember anything until you touch them 7 times. The problem is if your communication is different in those seven things, people get confused on what you do. So if the salesperson is saying your company does this, while your website says something that does that, and your CEO is saying something completely different on stage at name your show, Web Summit, or something like that. That confuses people and muddies your message. And then people don't have a clear sense of what you do. So it's important that you try to be consistent in all the communication mechanisms that you have. And the idea is that you need to build that digital footprint. And the reason why this is important is because everything you send out into the ether is part of your digital footprint. And you think about it this way. So how many people think that PR people help get you stories? They do, okay? They do a little bit. But how do they actually inform or help the journalists? No. What the journalists do today, what's the first thing a journalist does when they first hear about your company? They Google it, right? So before you even reach out to a journalist, make sure your digital footprint is clean and make sure it exists. Because that's the first thing anybody, your customer, your prospects are doing the same thing. The first thing they do is Google it. So your digital footprint, whether you do it on your, and you can do it, and actually the great thing is that because of the way the internet works, you can actually own things. Your own channels become important, your social channels, your blogs. What you put out there yourself on your own website actually has just as insightful and important as any of the articles that get put out, because it's part of your digital footprint. So 1, be consistent, and 2, be prolific with this messaging, okay? And then it activates. So that's it for today. I hope you found this to be useful. I actually, do you have any time for questions? Any more questions? I'm happy. I'll be around a little bit as well. But feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And thank you again for being here and attending. Thank you very much. It's beer time.